It begins with fire. Ripping through the night. A home destroyed. A life shattered. And a message meant to silence someone they thought had no power. But they made a mistake. What they set in motion is bigger than they ever imagined. A fight that will drag their darkest secrets into the light and turn an entire town upside down. This isn't just a story about loss. It's about resistance, truth, and the kind of courage that refuses to back down. And trust me, the ending, you won't see it coming. Stay tuned. Because every twist hits harder than the last. Let us know what time you're tuning in and where you're watching from. Drop a comment below. We'd love to hear your story too. Ava Henderson lived on the very edge of Willow Creek, Georgia. In a weathered little house she'd saved for years to buy. It wasn't much. Just 2 bedrooms. And peeling paint. But to her and her 8-year-old daughter Sierra, it was everything. It was safety. It was theirs. That morning, Ava woke up to the low hum of tires crunching gravel outside. She pulled the faded curtain aside and saw the familiar white and blue of a patrol cruiser slowly rolling past, headlights cutting through the early mist. Even though the sun was already peeking over the horizon, she stiffened. It wasn't the first time she'd noticed them lately. Circling slow, like vultures, looking for something to pick clean. Sierra shuffled into the kitchen, rubbing her eyes, her Hello Kitty slippers dragging against the linoleum. "Mom, they're out there again," she said in a small voice. Ava smiled for her sake, even as her stomach nodded. "It's nothing, baby," she lied. "Just making sure everyone's safe." As they ate their cereal, the news droned in the background. Another story about tensions rising between law enforcement and local communities. Ava muted the TV. Sierra didn't need to hear that. Not before school. Not before another day of pretending everything was normal. After dropping Sierra off at the bus stop, Ava drove to her shift at the diner downtown. Willow Creek wasn't big, but it had its share of small-town tension. She could feel the sideways glances when she walked in. She could hear the sudden silences when she passed tables. It hadn't always been this way. But lately, it was different. Tighter. Meaner. "Morning, Ava," called out Tom from behind the counter. A decent man. One of the few who hadn't changed with the others. She forced a smile and tied on her apron. The day dragged by in a blur of coffee refills, fried eggs, and the clink of cheap silverware. But underneath it all, she couldn't shake the feeling. Something was brewing. Customers whispered in low tones, shifting their eyes toward the window. Whenever a police cruiser rumbled down Main Street, even Tom seemed more guarded today. During her lunch break, Ava stepped out back to call her brother, Marcus. She leaned against the brick wall, feeling the roughness against her shoulder blades, craving the steady sound of his voice. "Marcus." "Hey," she said when he picked up. "You got a minute?" "Always for you, sis," Marcus replied, calm as ever. She could picture him now. Sharp suit. Clean shave. That unshakable confidence he'd always had. How's Sierra? She's good, Ava said. Still acing her spelling tests. She made a friend at school. Finally. Her voice faltered for a moment. Listen, Marcus. Things feel off lately. I think they're watching us. There was a pause on the line. Who's they? The cops, she whispered. Glancing over her shoulder. They keep driving by. Real slow. Real obvious. Marcus didn't brush her off. He never did. Ava, he said carefully. If you feel something's wrong, trust it. Keep your head down. Lock your doors. Stay alert. And if anything happens, call me. I will, she promised. But even as she said it, a part of her wondered if she was already too late. When her shift ended, she picked Sierra up from her after-school program. They sang along to the radio. On the drive home, Sierra's sweet voice filling the car. For a little while, Ava let herself believe that maybe she was just being paranoid. Maybe everything was fine. But when they pulled into the driveway, her heart dropped. The mailbox had been spray-painted. During the day. Big ugly letters. In dripping red paint. Get out. Sierra gasped. Mom, who did that? Ava's voice was tight. Just some coward, baby. Don't worry about it. But she worried. She worried all through dinner. Through Sierra's homework. Through bedtime stories. She worried. As she double-checked every lock on every door and window. That night, she barely slept. Every creak of the house. Every distant car passing on the gravel road outside made her bolt upright. Heart hammering. The next morning, Ava found a dead crow nailed to her front porch. Its black feathers were matted with blood. Its wings splayed grotesquely. No note. Just the message. Loud and clear. She called the sheriff's office. Left a voicemail. No one called her back. At work. The stairs were bolder now. A few people muttered under their breath. As she passed. Troublemaker. She heard one woman hiss. Ava gritted her teeth. She wasn't looking for trouble. She was just trying to live. Trying to raise her daughter. In peace. But peace, it seemed, wasn't something Willow Creek was willing to give her. That night, after Sierra fell asleep, Ava sat alone in the living room. The TV flickering quietly in the background. She scrolled through her phone. Half a mind to call Marcus again. But stopped herself. She didn't want to sound paranoid. Maybe it would die down. If she just stayed quiet. The knock came at midnight. 3 loud, hard pounds. On the front door. Ava froze. Her breath catching in her throat. The house was silent. Except for the soft hum of the refrigerator. Sierra stirred upstairs. But didn't wake. Another 3 bangs. Sheriff's Department. Open up. Her heart thudded painfully. Against her ribs. Slowly. She crossed the living room. Her bare feet soundless. On the old hardwood floor. She peeked through the peephole. Outside. She counted at least 4 men. All with grim, unsmiling faces. One of them. Sheriff Dale Harmon himself. Stood front and center. His hand casually resting on the butt of his gun. Ava hesitated. Her instincts screamed. Not to open the door. But they also screamed. That if she didn't, they might just break it down. She cracked the door. The chain still latched. "Can I help you?" she asked, voice steady. "We have reports you're harboring fugitives," Harmon said. His tone made it clear. He didn't believe he needed any proof. "Step aside, ma'am." "Do you have a warrant?" Ava asked. Harmon smiled thinly. "We don't need one." Ava felt something shift in the air. Something final. "Ma'am, open this door. Or we'll open it for you." One of the deputies barked. Ava backed away. Heart hammering. She slammed the door. And threw the deadbolt. "Mom!" Sierra's small voice called from upstairs. Before Ava could answer, the door frame splintered. With a deafening crack, the men flooded inside. Boots thudding heavy on the floorboards. Sierra screamed from upstairs. Ava turned to run toward her daughter. But a heavy hand grabbed her arm, yanking her back. "You have no right," Ava cried. But they weren't listening. And in the chaos, the shouting, the stomping, the flicker of firelight, caught Ava's eye. She spun around. Just in time to see the curtains by the front window catch flame. The house. Their sanctuary. Their little piece of safety. In a world that had never been safe for people like them, was about to become a pyre. Smoke thickened in the living room, curling up the walls like dark fingers, clawing for something to consume. Ava's chest tightened as she jerked free from the deputy's grip and bolted up the stairs toward Sierra. The house moaned as the flames spread, the old wood groaning under the heat. "Mommy!" Sierra cried from the top of the landing, her little hands clutching the banister. "Come here, baby!" Ava screamed, heart pounding so hard it nearly deafened her. She scooped Sierra into her arms and turned back toward the stairs. But the front room was already a wall of fire. She spun toward the back of the house, remembering the kitchen door. Smoke stung her eyes, made every breath a choking effort. She could barely see, barely think. But instinct carried her forward. Behind her, she could hear the officers shouting, cursing at each other, scrambling. But she didn't waste time looking back. They weren't going to help her. They never came to help her. In the kitchen, the fire had already caught hold of the cabinets. Ava threw her weight against the back door. It stuck for a moment, swollen from years of humidity. But then it gave with a loud crack. And the cool night air rushed in like salvation. She staggered out into the backyard, clutching Sierra against her chest. Sierra buried her face in Ava's shoulder, coughing and sobbing. The night was so still outside. It felt wrong. The house roared behind them, sending sparks spiraling into the sky. Ava backed away, still holding her daughter, her mind racing. Across the fence, the neighbors had gathered, silent, staring. Not one of them moved to help. Then she saw them. Sheriff Harmon and his men, standing by their cruisers, watching the house burn with grim satisfaction. Harmon caught her eye. And for a brief, terrible moment, he smiled. It wasn't an accident. It never was. Ava wanted to scream, to rush at him. But she clamped her jaw shut. Sierra trembled in her arms. And that tiny body reminded her what mattered most. They needed to survive. Fire trucks arrived. 10 minutes later, Long enough that there wasn't much left to save. The volunteers jumped into action. But Ava could see it in their faces. They already knew. They were too late. A paramedic tried to check Sierra for burns. But Ava refused to let her daughter out of her arms. Not yet. Not after what had just happened. Inside that house. You need to come with us, ma'am. One of the deputies said. Stepping closer. His hand rested casually on his belt. Right near his gun. For what? Ava rasped. Through the smoke tearing at her throat. Obstruction. He said flatly. Failure to comply. Resisting lawful search. Ava stared at him. Disbelief flooding her. You burned my house down. She whispered. You almost killed my daughter. And you're going to arrest me? Harmon walked up. Calm as a man strolling through a Sunday picnic. You're free to file a complaint. He said smoothly. After we finish processing you, of course. Ava's knees wobbled. But she stood firm. Clutching Sierra tighter. Across the street. Mrs. Kinley. An elderly white woman. Who had lived next door for decades. Stood on her porch. Clutching her robe closed. Her mouth tight. Their eyes met. Ava silently pleaded with her. Say something. Help me. But Mrs. Kinley only turned. And went inside. Locking her door. The deputy grabbed Ava's arm. She jerked back instinctively. And immediately. 3 more officers surrounded her. Hands reaching. That's when a black SUV screeched to a halt at the curb. Marcus. He was out of the car in seconds. Flashing a badge. Faster than the deputies could react. Federal agent. Marcus barked. His voice was sharp. Commanding. In a way Ava had never heard before. Let her go. For a second. Everything froze. The sheriff's deputies exchanged looks. The fire cracked and hissed behind them. Casting everything in a surreal orange glow. Harmon's smile slipped. Marcus stepped between Ava and the deputies. Standing broad and immovable. He pulled his ID again. Flashing it at Harmon. You will not touch this woman or her child. You will not speak to them. You will step away. Now. The sheer authority in Marcus's voice made them hesitate. We're within our jurisdiction. Harmon said. But there was an edge to his voice now. Not anymore. Marcus snapped. Federal oversight just opened an investigation. Into this town's law enforcement practices. Effective immediately. You're to cease all enforcement actions. Against Ava Henderson. Any further contact will be considered obstruction of justice. The deputies shifted uncomfortably. One muttered something under his breath. Try me. Marcus said. His voice low and dangerous. Slowly. Reluctantly. The deputies backed away. Harmon didn't move. His cold gaze stayed locked on Ava. You think this is over? It's just beginning. Marcus said. Stepping closer to Harmon. Until they were almost nose to nose. And if you so much as breathe wrong, I'll make sure you spend the rest of your life explaining yourself to a federal grand jury. Harmon sneered. But said nothing. Marcus turned. Wrapping a protective arm around Ava and Sierra. And guided them toward his SUV. Come on. We're getting out of here. The ride was silent for a long time. Sierra fell asleep. Exhausted. Curled up against Ava's side. Ava stared out the window. Watching the burning remains of their home. fade into the distance. They were trying to kill us, she said finally, her voice numb. Marcus's hands tightened on the steering wheel. Yeah, he said. I know. He didn't say anything for a long time after that. Neither did she. Finally, Marcus said. I've been hearing things about Willow Creek. 4 months. But this is bigger than I thought. Ava turned to look at him. How big? Marcus's jaw clenched. Bad enough. That burning down your house was just the beginning. They're not just trying to scare you, Ava. They want you gone. Ava looked down at Sierra, her heart cracking open at the sight of her daughter's tear-streaked face. I'm not running, Ava said quietly. Not this time. Marcus nodded once. Good. Because we're going to make them regret ever coming after you. Outside. The dark Georgia woods swallowed the road ahead. Somewhere behind them, Willow Creek smoldered. But Ava wasn't afraid anymore. They had tried to destroy her. Tried to erase her. Instead, they had lit a fire inside her that no amount of water could ever put out. Marcus drove through the night, taking back roads he knew well from his childhood, but hadn't traveled in years. Every few minutes, he checked the rear-view mirror, scanning for headlights. Ava sat silent beside him, her arms wrapped around Sierra, who slept fitfully in her lap, mumbling soft, scared things in her dreams. The further they got from Willow Creek, the tighter Ava clung to her daughter, as if afraid that if she blinked, they'd disappear too. Where are we going? Ava finally asked, her voice raw from the smoke and fear. Safe house, Marcus said, without looking away from the road. An old place. Used it back when I first started undercover work. Nobody knows about it anymore. He hesitated, then added, not even the bureau. Ava nodded slowly. Trust wasn't something she gave easily anymore. But Marcus had never given her a reason to doubt him. Not when they were kids scraping by. Not when she called him crying. The night she left Sierra's father. And not now. The SUV rolled off the main highway, tires crunching onto a narrow dirt path, surrounded by thick woods. After another mile, they came to a rundown cabin, hidden deep among the pines. It leaned a little to one side, but it had solid walls. No neighbors for miles. And no one watching. Marcus killed the engine and turned to her. We lay low here for now. No phone calls unless absolutely necessary. No social media. No visitors. Not even people you think you can trust. Ava nodded again, swallowing hard. Inside, the cabin smelled like dust and old wood. But it was dry. And the locks worked. There was even an old generator out back that still sputtered to life when Marcus kicked it into gear, giving them a few working lights. He set Sierra down on the sagging couch and pulled a tattered blanket over her. She stirred, but didn't wake. Ava brushed the hair from her daughter's forehead and kissed her gently. You need rest too, Marcus said softly. Ava shook her head. Not yet. Marcus didn't argue. Instead, he pulled out his laptop, booted it up, and connected to a private network, using equipment he kept hidden in a false bottom of his duffel bag. Within minutes, he was pulling data from confidential law enforcement servers. Ava watched him for a while, sitting cross-legged on the floor, with her back against the wall. Finally, she asked. How deep does this go? Marcus's fingers paused on the keys. His face was grim in the glow of the screen. Worse than we thought. Harmon's just a piece. There's records. Sealed ones. A pattern of property seizures. Targeting black families. Going back over 15 years. Ava's stomach twisted. Seizures. Like what happened to us. Exactly like what happened to us, Marcus said. Leaning back in his chair. They scare people out. Burn homes if they have to. Fabricate charges if needed. Then the properties get bought up. By shell companies. For pennies. And nobody stops them. He gave a bitter laugh. Local judges. County officials. Even parts of the state attorney's office. They're all in on it. One big rotten network. Ava felt bile rise in her throat. She wrapped her arms around her knees. Trying to steady herself. Why my house? She whispered. Why now? Marcus hesitated. Then he clicked open a file. And turned the laptop toward her. There. Under a long list of names and addresses. Was hers. Ava Henderson. Highlighted. Labeled. Priority removal. She stared at it. Trying to breathe. They want your land, Marcus said. The development company planning that new resort. Your property's in their way. Ava closed her eyes. She thought about the years she spent saving. About the home she built. Room by room. The way Sierra picked out. The yellow paint for her bedroom walls. The birthdays. The Christmas mornings. The life they were making. Gone. Burned away like it was nothing. And they would have gotten away with it. Marcus added quietly. If you hadn't survived. Ava opened her eyes. They burned. But not from smoke this time. From rage. Then we make sure. They regret leaving us alive. She said. Marcus smiled grimly. That's my sister. He spent the next few hours. Downloading files. Piecing together a trail of corruption. That stretched further than even he had guessed. Each document was another nail in their enemy's coffin. But Marcus knew better than to think evidence alone would save them. The system protected itself. Always had. By sunrise. He had enough to start a case. But not enough to bring the whole rotten structure down. They needed more. They needed proof. That couldn't be explained away. Or buried. Ava paced the cabin. Restless. The adrenaline from the night before. Refusing to ebb. Every creak of the floorboards made her flinch. Every gust of wind against the window felt like a threat. She kept thinking about Harmon's face. As the house burned. The casual cruelty of it. The certainty that no one would hold him accountable. They'll come looking. She said suddenly. Marcus looked up from his screen. I know. Then what? Her voice was raw. Then we make a move. He said simply. But on our terms. He stood. And crossed to her. Placing a firm hand on her shoulder. Listen to me, Ava. They're powerful. They're dirty. But they're not invincible. They're arrogant. That's their weakness. She met his eyes. What do we do first? We gather allies. People outside Willow Creek. People who still believe in the law. And if we can't find enough. Marcus's eyes were cold steel. Then we burn their system down. The same way they burned your home. Sierra whimpered in her sleep. Ava immediately went to her, smoothing her hair back, whispering soft reassurances. Marcus watched them, his jaw tightening. He pulled out his phone, encrypted the line, and made a call. "I'm activating a dormant contact," he said when the voice on the other end picked up. Code red. There was a pause. "Understood," the voice replied. Marcus ended the call, and slipped the phone back into his pocket. He turned back to Ava, his voice steady. "We're not running anymore," he said. "We fight." Ava looked down at Sierra, then back at Marcus. "Then let's make them wish. They'd never come after us." The sun climbed higher over the treetops, casting long, slanting beams of light across the battered front porch of the cabin. It looked peaceful from the outside, but inside, a storm was gathering, and Willow Creek wasn't ready for what was coming. The next morning, Ava stood on the edge of what was left of her life. The ashes of her home were still smoldering, sending faint wisps of smoke curling into the pale sky. Pieces of her past were scattered at her feet. Charred picture frames, the blackened metal skeleton of Sierra's bike, bits of furniture too twisted to recognize. She didn't cry. She didn't have any tears left. Marcus stood a few paces behind her, keeping watch, his hand never straying far from the concealed weapon at his hip. He hadn't said much on the drive back. He didn't need to. Some things didn't need words. Ava stepped carefully over the debris, boots crunching on broken glass, searching without really knowing what she was looking for. Maybe something salvageable. Maybe just a piece of what had been stolen from them. Near the back, where the kitchen had been, something caught her eye. A flash of white beneath a charred beam. She crouched down, using the toe of her boot to push aside the debris. There, half buried in the ashes, was a scorched metal box. One of those old lock boxes people used to keep documents in before everything went digital. Her heart picked up speed. "Marcus," she called out, without looking back. He was at her side in 2 strides. Together, they pried the box open. The hinges squealed, but gave way. Inside, wrapped in layers of plastic, was a stack of papers. Most were singed at the edges, but still legible. Ava carefully peeled them apart, her hands trembling. Not from fear, but from something deeper. The top page bore an official Willow Creek Sheriff's Department letterhead. Marcus pulled on a pair of gloves from his jacket pocket and took the documents from her, flipping through them quickly. "What is it?" Ava asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Marcus didn't answer at first. His jaw clenched tighter with every page he read. Finally, he looked up, eyes hard. "Proof." "Proof of what?" Marcus handed her one of the papers. It was a memo. A simple one. But at the bottom, scrawled in black ink, was the signature of Sheriff Dale Harmon. The memo outlined a plan. An unofficial, off-the-books operation. Target properties owned by minority families. Fabricate probable cause. Seize land under civil forfeiture laws. Transfer ownership through shell companies. Tied to the county's largest developer. It was all right there. Names. Dates. Handwritten notes. Even worse. There were payment records. Money quietly funneled to deputies. Who executed the operations. Bonuses for successful seizures. Ava's hands shook. They were going to do this. To more families, she said. Voice cracking. Not just us. They already have, Marcus said grimly. We just didn't know it. Ava pressed the papers against her chest. Feeling their weight. Their terrible truth. This was the kind of thing that could bring down a sheriff. A department. Maybe even more. But only if they lived long enough to get it into the right hands. Marcus glanced around. Scanning the tree line. We can't stay here, he said. If Harmon figures out you found something, he won't wait for the courts. He'll come for you himself. As they gathered the surviving documents, a rustling sound from the woods made them both freeze. Ava's heart raced. Marcus drew his weapon, motioning for her to get behind him. From the trees, two figures emerged. Neighbors. From a few houses down. Mr. Nguyen and Mrs. Alvarez. Ava recognized them. Kind older couple. Quiet. Mrs. Alvarez raised her hands slowly. We saw what they did. She said. Voice trembling. We saw everything. Marcus didn't lower the gun. But he eased his stance slightly. Then you know why we can't trust anyone right now. Mr. Alvarez stepped forward carefully. We're not here to hurt you. We're here to help. Ava searched their faces. Looking for any sign of deceit. Any hint of betrayal. All she saw was fear. And something else. Guilt. They did it to our son. Mrs. Alvarez whispered. Tears welling up. Years ago. Claimed he was selling drugs. Took everything we had. He couldn't take it. He left town. Never came back. Ava's chest tightened. Another life shattered. Another family broken. You have proof? Marcus asked sharply. The Alvarezes exchanged a glance. Mr. Alvarez nodded slowly. Some old police reports. Documents. Nothing as solid as what you have. But it's a start. Marcus finally lowered his weapon fully. All right. We need to move now. They made their way back to Marcus's SUV. Ava clutching the scorched papers to her chest. As if they were her last lifeline. As they drove away from the ruins of her home, Ava kept her eyes on the rear-view mirror. No cars followed. Not yet. But she knew better than to believe they were safe. At the cabin, Marcus immediately set up a secure workstation. He scanned the documents into an encrypted drive. Made multiple backup copies. And uploaded the files to a hidden server. Only he could access. Ava sat at the kitchen table, staring at the laptop screen. As each file loaded, every document was a nail hammered deeper into the coffin of Willow Creek's so-called justice system. But with every click, every page, Ava felt the danger grow heavier in the room. They're going to know we have this, she said quietly. Marcus nodded. Sooner or later. What do we do? He looked at her. His expression grim but determined. We get it into the right hands. Media. Civil rights organizations. Maybe even the DOJ. And Harmon. Marcus's voice was like steel. We deal with him too. A knock sounded at the door. Both of them froze. Marcus motioned for Ava to grab Sierra and get down. He moved to the side of the window, peering out without revealing himself. A delivery van sat parked a few yards away. No logos. Tinted windows. No one got out. Marcus cursed under his breath. We're out of time. He grabbed the encrypted drive and shoved it into a go bag. Ava, listen to me, he said, voice low and urgent. No matter what happens, you protect Sierra. You get to Eleanor Blake. She's the only reporter I trust right now. But what about you? Marcus gave her a tight smile. I'll buy you time. Before she could protest, he was moving, checking the back exit, scanning the woods for cover. Ava clutched Sierra to her chest, feeling her daughter's small heartbeat flutter against her ribs. Outside, the van door slid open. 3 men stepped out. None of them wearing uniforms. And none of them looked like they came to talk. Ava gritted her teeth. Stealing herself. They burned her home. They tried to break her. But they hadn't finished the job. And they were about to find out why that was a mistake. The second Marcus saw the men stepping out of the van. He knew they weren't amateurs. Their movements were tight, coordinated. Their faces hidden under caps pulled low. Jackets loose enough to conceal weapons. Ava gripped Sierra's hand, pulling her back toward the kitchen. Her mind raced. There were too many of them. Too many ways this could go wrong. Marcus drew his gun. Ava, he said urgently. Back window. Take Sierra. Now. But what about you? Go. He barked. Eyes never leaving the men. Approaching the cabin. Ava didn't hesitate. She scooped Sierra up in her arms, her daughter's small body trembling against hers, and ran toward the back. The window was old. Stubborn. She threw it up with a screech. Shoved Sierra through first. Then climbed out herself, scraping her hands and knees on the rough wood. She hit the ground running, not daring to look back. Gunfire erupted behind her. Short, controlled bursts. Sierra cried out. But Ava tightened her grip and kept moving. Branches tore at her face. Rocks bruised her feet, through her thin shoes. But she didn't stop. Marcus was buying them time. Just like he said. Ava's lungs burned. By the time she reached the tree line, her legs shaking from adrenaline, she ducked behind a thick cluster of pines, setting Sierra down, but keeping a tight hold on her. Stay quiet, baby, she whispered, brushing Sierra's hair out of her face. Whatever happens, don't make a sound. Sierra nodded. Her face pale. Her eyes huge with terror. They waited. Minutes stretched into an eternity. Then Ava heard it. Footsteps. Crunching through the brush. Too many to count. Voices. Low and urgent. They couldn't have gotten far. Fan out. Find them. Ava's heart thudded painfully against her ribs. She pulled Sierra closer, shielding her with her own body, as best she could. Through a gap in the trees, she saw them. 2 men. Sweeping flashlights. Back and forth. Weapons drawn. One wrong move. One snapped twig. And they were dead. Sierra whimpered softly. The sound barely audible. But it was enough. A beam of light swung in their direction. There. Ava scooped Sierra up. And ran. Darting through the trees. In a blind sprint. Branches whipped her face. Her lungs screamed for air. But she didn't stop. Gunfire cracked through the woods. A bullet tore through a branch. Inches from Ava's head. She zigzagged. Weaving between trees. Stumbling down a shallow ravine. Mud slicked her shoes. But somehow she kept her feet under her. Ahead. Through the trees. She spotted the faint glint of metal. A road. Maybe someone would be driving by. Maybe they could flag down help. Ava pushed herself harder. Her muscles screaming. Almost there. Almost. A shadow moved to her right. She didn't have time to react. Rough hands grabbed her. Yanking Sierra from her arms. No. Ava screamed. Thrashing. Clawing at the man's face. But another figure tackled her from behind. Pinning her to the ground. She fought like a wild animal. Scratching. Kicking. Biting. But there were too many. Strong hands held her down. While Sierra screamed for her mother. Her little voice. Raw with terror. Get the kid. One of the men barked. Ava twisted her head. Just in time to see them. Throw Sierra. Into the back of a black SUV. Parked at the roadside. The door slammed shut. The engine roared to life. No. Sierra. Ava sobbed. Struggling against the hands holding her. Then a hard blow. Landed at the base of her skull. And everything went black. When Ava woke. She was alone. The woods were silent. The SUV, long gone. She staggered to her feet. Her head pounding. Blood sticky. On the side of her face. Sierra, she croaked. Spinning around wildly. As if her daughter might. Somehow. Still be nearby. But there was nothing. Only trees. Only silence. Ava stumbled back toward the cabin. Marcus wasn't there. The place was ransacked. Papers, scattered. Laptop, smashed. No sign of a struggle. He must have gotten out. Her hands shook. As she fumbled for her phone. The screen was cracked. But still working. She dialed Marcus. He picked up on the first ring. Ava. They took her, she gasped out. Collapsing onto the floor. They took Sierra. There was a beat of silence. Where are you? Marcus demanded. His voice low and urgent. The woods. Near the cabin. I don't know. I'm tracking you. Stay put. I'm coming. Ava hung up. Wrapping her arms around herself. Every second. That passed without Sierra. Felt like another knife. Twisting deeper. Into her gut. She should have fought harder. She should have died. Before letting them take her daughter. Minutes later. Tires screeched to a halt outside. Ava scrambled to her feet. As Marcus burst through. What was left? Of the front door. He crossed the room in 2 strides. And grabbed her shoulders. Are you hurt? Ava shook her head wildly. I'm fine. Marcus. They have her. I know, he said. His voice tight with rage. I'm going to get her back. How? Ava choked out. We don't even know where they took her. Marcus's jaw tightened. He reached into his jacket. And pulled out a small device. An old GPS tracker. I planted one, he said. Inside her favorite teddy bear. Just in case something like this ever happened. Ava's knees buckled. She caught the edge of the table, sobbing with relief. Marcus was already pulling up the coordinates. A blinking red dot flashed on the screen, moving slowly along a side road east of Willow Creek. They're heading toward the old industrial district, he said. Ava wiped her eyes, forcing herself to focus. That place is a ghost town. Half the buildings are abandoned. Exactly, Marcus said grimly. Perfect place to hide a kidnapped child. Ava straightened up, her whole body trembling, but determined. I'm coming with you. Marcus opened his mouth to argue, then saw the look in her eyes. He nodded once. All right. Let's bring her home. They grabbed what gear they could salvage. 2 pistols. A flashlight. A small first aid kit. And jumped back into Marcus's SUV. As they tore down the back roads, the tracker beeped steadily, guiding them toward the industrial ruins. Ava gripped the dashboard, her mind racing. Whoever had Sierra wasn't working alone. This wasn't random. This was coordinated. Planned. And they weren't just trying to scare Ava anymore. They were trying to break her completely. But they had made a fatal mistake. They had touched her daughter. And there was nothing more dangerous than a mother with nothing left to lose. The crumbling warehouses of the industrial district rose up ahead, jagged against the fading light. The air smelled like rust and rot. Ava's pulse hammered in her ears as Marcus slowed the SUV, scanning the surroundings. There, she whispered, pointing. The GPS tracker showed Sierra's signal coming from a warehouse at the far end of the lot. Its windows were boarded up, its roof sagging. Marcus nodded. No backup, he said. We go in fast. We get her out. Ava checked the pistol in her hand. Her fingers steady now. I'm ready, she said. Marcus met her eyes. So am I. Together. They slipped into the shadows, moving silently toward the place where Sierra was being held, toward the heart of the enemy's lair, toward the fight of their lives. The old warehouse loomed ahead, dark and crumbling. Its windows, shattered. Its walls coated with decades of grime. It looked abandoned to anyone passing by. But Marcus knew better. Inside, Sierra was waiting. And so were the men who took her. Ava moved silently beside him, the pistol steady in her hands. Her face was pale, but determined. Fear simmered in her eyes. Sure. But it was buried under something stronger. Something dangerous. She was ready to do whatever it took. Marcus pointed to a side door, hanging off its hinges. We go through there, he whispered. Stay close. Quiet. Ava nodded. They slipped inside. The stale air, heavy with the smell of mold and oil. The faint sound of footsteps echoed somewhere deeper in the building. Distant voices, laughing. Casual. They thought they were safe. Marcus led the way, stepping carefully around broken glass and debris. They moved down a long hallway, past empty offices, with doors hanging open like broken jaws. The GPS tracker in his pocket beeped quietly, getting closer. Ava spotted it first. A faint light spilling from a room at the end of the hall. She grabbed Marcus's arm. And pointed. He nodded. They crept forward. Pressing themselves. Against the wall beside the door. Inside. They could hear them clearly now. 3 men, maybe 4. Talking and laughing. As if they didn't have a care in the world. And somewhere. Muffled and small. A child's whimper. Ava's hands tightened around the pistol. Until her knuckles turned white. Marcus leaned in close. Whispering directly into her ear. On my signal. Fast and hard. No hesitation. She nodded once. Marcus counted silently. 3. 2. 1. Then kicked the door open. With a crash. The men inside jumped up. Startled. One reached for a gun. But Marcus dropped him. With a single shot. To the leg. He went down, screaming. Ava moved. Like she had been trained. Her whole life for this. She crossed the room. In 2 quick strides. And found Sierra. Tied to a chair. Duct tape over her mouth. Tears streaking down her dirty cheeks. Ava ripped the tape free. Pulling her daughter into her arms. It's okay, baby. She whispered fiercely. Mommy's here. I've got you. Marcus kept his weapon trained. On the remaining men. Who froze. Hands half raised. One of them. A wiry guy with a mean face. Sneered. You think saving her changes anything? He spat. You're dead already. You just don't know it yet. Marcus stepped closer. His voice cold and lethal. Tell me who you're working for. Now. The man laughed. You think Harmon's the only one? You think this town's dirty? Buddy. The whole damn county's rotten. You take us down. There's 10 more waiting. Marcus's eyes narrowed. Before he could press further. The sound of engines. Rumbled outside. Headlights flashed. Through the broken windows. Move. Marcus barked. Ava clutched Sierra tightly. As Marcus herded them. Out of the room. Back into the hallway. Behind them. The men shouted. Struggling to get up. To call for backup. Marcus pushed Ava and Sierra. Toward the back of the building. Toward a service door. Hanging half open. Gunfire erupted behind them. Bullets pinged off the walls. Showering them with splinters and dust. Ava shielded Sierra with her body. As they ran. Marcus fired back over his shoulder. Forcing the shooters to duck. They burst out into the night. Stumbling into a lot. Overgrown with weeds. And littered with rusting machinery. More trucks screeched to a halt nearby. Men poured out. Some in deputy uniforms. Others in plain clothes. All armed. They were surrounded. Ava pressed Sierra against a stack of old pallets. Her heart hammering. Marcus crouched beside them. Reloading quickly. We're not going to win a firefight. He said grimly. Too many. What do we do? Ava hissed. Marcus's eyes flicked around, calculating. Distraction. Create chaos. Find an opening. Ava nodded, her mind racing. Nearby she spotted a forklift. Sitting abandoned. Keys still dangling from the ignition. She touched Marcus's arm and pointed. He grinned. A quick, fierce expression. You're thinking like a Henderson now. While Marcus laid down covering fire. Ava sprinted for the forklift. Bullets whizzed past her. But somehow none found their mark. She jumped onto the seat. Twisted the key. And the old machine roared to life. Heads turned. Shouts went up. Ava slammed the gas pedal, sending the forklift barreling into a pile of metal drums stacked beside the lot. The drums crashed down, rolling wildly, scattering the men who had been closing in. Chaos. Marcus seized the moment. He grabbed Sierra, shouting for Ava to follow. They sprinted for the far fence. A sagging chain-link barrier, half crushed by years of neglect. Marcus tossed Sierra over first, then helped Ava scramble up and over. Gunfire chased them, bullets tearing holes in the fence. They hit the ground running, disappearing into the woods. Beyond the lot. Behind them. Harmon's men regrouped, shouting into radios. Engines roaring to life. But Marcus had planned their escape well. He led them through dense brush, across a shallow creek, and up a rocky incline, where their second vehicle, a beat-up old Jeep, waited under a tarp. They piled inside, hearts pounding, lungs burning. Marcus peeled away from the scene, tires spitting gravel. They drove in silence for a long time, each of them catching their breath, checking Sierra for injuries. Other than bruises and a few scrapes. She was okay. Finally, when the adrenaline began to ebb, Ava turned to Marcus. Now what? Marcus's jaw tightened. Now we take this public. All of it. Harmon. The land seizures. The kidnapping. Everything. They'll come after us harder. Ava said, her voice low. Marcus nodded. Let them. He glanced in the rearview mirror. At Sierra, curled up in the back seat. Her eyes finally closed. In exhausted sleep. They made a mistake. Marcus said softly. They came after family. Ava stared out at the dark road ahead, feeling a strange, burning certainty settle inside her. They were done running. Now it was their turn to strike back. By the time the sun crested over the Georgia pines, Ava knew. There was no going back. The Jeep bounced along a narrow country road, dust rising in their wake. Sierra slept fitfully in the back seat, clutching the battered teddy bear Marcus had tucked the tracker into. Every so often she whimpered softly. And Ava's heart broke a little more. Marcus drove with one hand on the wheel, his eyes constantly scanning the mirrors, checking for tails. His jaw was tight, his body coiled like a spring. They couldn't just hide anymore. They had to hit back. We go public, Marcus said, breaking the silence. His voice was low, but firm. Full exposure. We leak everything. The ghost file. The tracker data. The kidnapping. The recordings I got during the raid. How? Ava asked. Who's going to believe us? Harmon has half the county in his pocket. Not everybody, Marcus said. Eleanor Blake will. She's been trying to take down these networks for years. She just never had enough proof. And if we can't reach her, then we blow it wide open online. Leak it to every journalist. Every watchdog group. Make it too big for them to bury. Ava tightened her hands around her knees. They'll come after us harder. They're already coming, Marcus said. But this time, we don't let them choose the battlefield. He pulled off the main road, parking behind an abandoned gas station, half swallowed by kudzu vines. They needed to swap vehicles again. He had stashed another car here days ago. An old silver sedan, with untraceable plates. Marcus popped the trunk of the Jeep, and pulled out a duffel bag. Inside were burner phones, backup IDs, some cash, and a second encrypted drive, containing copies of all the evidence they'd gathered. Always have a plan B. He hadn't survived years in undercover work without learning that the hard way. They moved quickly. Marcus hotwired the sedan in under a minute, while Ava settled Sierra in the back seat. Then they were back on the road, heading toward the city, toward war. As they drove, Ava scrolled through the burner phone, finding Eleanor Blake's private number. She took a deep breath and hit call. It rang once, twice. Then a curt, weary voice answered. Blake. Eleanor, Ava said, forcing the words past the lump in her throat. My name's Ava Henderson. I have something you need to see. It's about Willow Creek. There was a beat of silence. Who gave you this number? Blake asked sharply. Marcus Henderson. FBI. Another pause. Longer this time. Then Eleanor's voice softened. Just a little. Where can we meet? Marcus took the phone, rattling off an address. A coffee shop on the edge of the city. Public enough to make an ambush risky. 1 hour, Eleanor said. Then she hung up. No reassurances. No promises. Just business. Marcus tossed the phone onto the passenger seat. She's in. Ava tried to steady her breathing. This was it. Everything they'd been through. The fire. The kidnapping. The chase. It all led to this. An hour later, they sat in a corner booth of a dingy coffee shop. The smell of burnt toast hanging in the air. Eleanor Blake walked in precisely on time. She was older than Ava had expected. Late 50s, maybe early 60s. Sharp eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. A notebook clutched under one arm. Like a weapon. She slid into the booth across from them. Without a word. Her gaze sweeping over Ava. Then Marcus. Then settling on Sierra, who was coloring quietly in a corner, with a few crayons the waitress had handed her. You've got 3 minutes to convince me you're not wasting my time, Eleanor said briskly. Marcus didn't waste a second. He pulled out the drive. The backup documents. Laid everything out. Photos. Memos. Financial records. GPS logs. The tracker data from Sierra's teddy bear. Eleanor flipped through it all, her expression growing darker with each page. Finally, she set the papers down and looked up. Holy hell, she breathed. Will you help us? Ava asked, her voice raw. Eleanor didn't hesitate. I'll do more than help, she said. I'll burn the whole damn place down. Eleanor leaned closer, her voice dropping to a near whisper. I'm going to need a few hours, she said. Maybe a day at most. To verify this. Corroborate it. Build it airtight. You trust me to do that? Ava hesitated only a second. Then she nodded. Yes. Eleanor's sharp eyes softened slightly. I'll need to move fast. They'll come after you the minute this starts leaking. Marcus nodded grimly. We know. Stay off the grid. No phones. No cards. No internet. Ava hugged Sierra tighter against her. How will we know when it's safe? Eleanor pulled a battered business card from her pocket. On the back, she scribbled a phrase. The river rises at dawn. When you hear that on the news, she said, you'll know it's done. You'll know Harmon's empire is burning. She stood, gathering the files into her worn satchel. Be ready. When this hits, you'll have friends. And enemies. Without another word, she turned and strode out of the coffee shop, moving like a woman. With a loaded gun in her briefcase, Marcus slumped back in the booth, rubbing a hand over his face. Ava stared after Eleanor, hope and fear warring in her chest. For the first time in days, there was a spark of something flickering to life inside her. Maybe, just maybe, they could win. The next 36 hours were a blur. They moved constantly, changing hotels, doubling back, taking side roads, and ducking into alleyways. At the slightest hint of danger, Sierra stayed brave. But the fear was starting to wear on her. Ava could see it. In the way her daughter clung to her hand. Even in her sleep. They slept in shifts. They ate cheap takeout. In borrowed cars. They barely spoke. Every hour that passed was a countdown ticking closer. To either salvation or disaster. Finally, at 5:42 a.m., as Ava sat in a dingy motel room, watching the static-filled TV, she heard it. The anchor. Her voice cool and composed. Reading the breaking news banner. Scrolling across the bottom of the screen. And in a developing story. A major investigation into civil forfeiture abuses has rocked several counties in Georgia. The Department of Justice confirmed it is opening an inquiry. Following explosive allegations. The river rises at dawn. Stay with us for more updates. Ava dropped the remote. It clattered to the floor. Marcus burst into the room. Still pulling a shirt over his head. You heard it? Ava nodded. Tears filling her eyes. They did it. They did it. Marcus grinned fiercely. We're not done yet. But damn if that ain't a start. He reached out, pulling Ava and Sierra into a fierce hug. For the first time in what felt like forever, Ava let herself believe. Really believe. That they had a future again. The fallout came fast and hard. Within hours, news vans descended on Willow Creek. Federal agents swept through the sheriff's department, seizing files, computers, and leading officers away in handcuffs. Sheriff Harmon was nowhere to be found. Rumors swirled. He was hiding. He was running. He was cutting deals. It didn't matter. His kingdom was falling. One by one. The pillars of corruption crashed to the ground. Judges, lawyers, real estate developers, politicians. Their names splashed across headlines. Their dirty secrets exposed to the world. Protests exploded overnight. Not just in Willow Creek, but in every town and city. Touched by the rot they had uncovered. People marched. Chanted. Demanded justice. Ava watched the news footage. With a numb sort of awe. It was bigger than she had ever dared dream. And it had started. Because she refused to bow. Because she chose to fight. Because she chose to survive. Weeks later, Ava stood outside the charred remains of her home. The investigators were gone. The yellow police tape flapped in the breeze. There was nothing left to save. But she wasn't here to mourn. She was here to say goodbye. Sierra clutched her hand tightly. Are we gonna build a new house, Mommy? Ava smiled down at her daughter. Her heart swelling with love and pride. Yes, baby. We're gonna build something even better. Sierra beamed. Her face full of hope. They stood there for a moment longer. Taking it all in. The ashes. The loss. The scars. And then they turned. Walking away. Into a future they had fought to reclaim. It wasn't over. There would be trials. There would be backlash. There would be hard days ahead. But Ava knew, deep in her bones, that no matter what came next, they would face it together. They had started a fire they couldn't put out. A movement they couldn't silence. A war they couldn't win. Because now, the people had woken up. And Ava Henderson wasn't afraid anymore. Not of Harmon. Not of the system. Not of anything. She had faced the flames. She had survived the storm. And now, she was the storm. The end.